This is a real and brutal experiment in death. A prisoner bound to a film was forcibly shaved. He struggles. The warden feels he's not having enough fun and takes matters into his own hands. Back in his cell, the man begins to regret it. It turns out he wasn't really a prisoner at all. He was actually participating in a behavioral experiment. He thought he'd get $1 million for spending 2 weeks in jail. But he had no idea. In just 6 days they would be reduced to monkeys. The economic crisis has caused many people to lose their jobs. Henry was no exception. He saw an advert in the paper. Just 2 weeks in prison and a big bonus. The experiment was relatively simple. The participants were divided into 2 groups. They played the roles of guards and prisoners. Neither side is allowed to use violence. They must live by the rules of a real prison. If a prisoner breaks the rules, he must be punished within 30 minutes. Otherwise, the red light goes on and the experiment is terminated and no one gets the prize. At this point, the participants don't realize the horror of the experiment. The first day of the experiment was not taken seriously. It was seen as a role-playing game. The general atmosphere was relaxed. Those playing the warning didn't feel particularly depressed. The prisoner didn't feel inferior. But then the basketball tips the balance. One of the inmates was playing ball. He accidentally hit a guard in the face. It was just an accident. The guard was fine with it. The other guard thought it was intentional. The punishment was necessary to maintain discipline in line with real prison life. The other guards agree. After all, it's all about the prize money. So the guard asked the old man to do 10 push-ups. But the old man refused. He thinks it's just a game and everyone should be treated equally. Why should we listen to you? But the guard increased the punishment. He asked everyone to do it together. One of the inmates accidentally volunteered to get down. The others followed suit. Eventually the old man had to comply. The warden was thrilled. They hadn't expected such obedience from the prisoners. For the first time, they felt the thrill of power. 30 minutes have passed in the surveillance room. The red light didn't come on. The guards laughed. They thought they were being punished correctly. From that moment on, the guards began to believe they were in charge. The idea of equality disappeared. But oppression always leads to resistance. The real human experiment had just begun. The next day there was a riot in the prison. Henry hadn't eaten all the food on his plate. The guards told him to eat it all. Henry wouldn't listen to him. He just dumped the food in the other man's hand. That's the problem. The civilized world will slowly deteriorate. In the surveillance room, the guards think the reason the inmates are so arrogant. They think the reason the prisoners are so arrogant is because they can't use violence. They believe the prisoners who led the resistance must be taught a lesson. So the warden proposes to humiliate them if they can't use violence. At night, while the prisoners were asleep, the guards stormed the prison with fire extinguishers. In order to establish their authority, they took advantage of the confusion to handcuff Henry, who was leading the resistance. They humiliated him in front of everyone. The man's got to bow down under the roof. Henry had to hold his tongue for a while. The warden then tamed the prisoners. This will never happen again. Do you understand me? I can't hear you. The others stopped fighting for fear of being humiliated. The guards look at the obedient prisoners. They were thrilled, especially the warden. He'd been in a state of being bullied before he took part in the experiment, but by participating in the experiment he gained more power and status. Looking in the mirror, he felt stronger and more confident. The next conflict will escalate again. The third day of the experiment, the warden addressed the prisoners again, promising that as long as everyone followed the rules, after 11 days, they would be rewarded and released. However, in the midst of the domestication process, the prison authorities discovered that one of the prisoners had disappeared. It turned out that Jack was too sick to stand up because of his diabetes. But the warden asked the guards to pull him up. Henry couldn't take it anymore. He decided to ask the warden to give Jack an insulin injection to ease his condition. It was a reasonable request, but the warden had become completely absorbed in his role of authority. He felt his authority was threatened. He got into a heated argument with Henry. He was close to violence. Fortunately, a colleague warned him that the experiment would be terminated if violence was used. But it didn't end there. By confronting the warden during the day, Henri had caused resentment in the warden, who had already had a taste of power. The warden felt his authority had been violated, so he and the other guards discussed ways to humiliate Henry. In order to prevent the violent behavior from being detected by the surveillance cameras and violating the rules of the experiment, the guards took Henry to an unmonitored location. They tied his hands and feet, humiliated him and shaved off all his hair. But the warden wasn't convinced. Kicked the chair over. They all pissed on Henry's face. Tom laughed at it. And that's what happened to him. Back in his cell, Henry struggled to clean himself with water. Despite this, he chose to endure it. The guards realized that violence in an unmonitored area was not an offense. This made them more aggressive. The guards used words and even weapons when they saw someone in trouble. Tom couldn't stand it. He said if the warden didn't stop, he'd quit the game. But their warden gave Tom a stern talking to. The inmates were in for a real hellish ride. On the fourth day, Jack's diabetes got worse. Henry decided to bribe Tom, the prison guard. He hoped he could steal the insulin. Tom agreed, even though he couldn't help himself. Tom's the only guard who's sticking to his guns so far. He didn't realize that the baggage storage area was also monitored. So the warden soon found out. The warden ordered Tom to hand over the insulin. Tom did so with fear and trepidation. In the end, the warden gave Jack the insulin, fearing for his life. It was Henry who started the whole thing. He's a dangerous man. Once Henry was taken care of, no one could shake his authority. The warden vowed to bring Henry to heel, so the warden took Henry into custody. This time, he had his men push Henry's head into a dirty toilet bowl over and over again. He forced him to admit he was a prisoner. Henry refused to do so at first, but after a long period of torture, Henry succumbed. The warden was satisfied. All that was left was to deal with Tom, the traitor. On the fifth day, the warden beat Tom up. Then he threw him in the prisoner's camp. He declared him a prisoner. The whole prison has become his personal domain. Henry can't take it anymore. He takes off his uniform. The other prisoners follow suit. The warden ordered him to put on his clothes. Surprisingly, Henri climbed up to the wire mesh and shouted at the monitors. In this way, he hopes to appeal to the outside world. In response, the warden overpowers him with his weapon. Jack rushes to stop him. The warden gets up and hits Jack over the head. He falls to the ground. To calm the prisoners, the warden orders everyone to be put in solitary confinement. He puts Henry in a steel barrel. While being placed in the barrel, he accidentally found a hidden camera. It suddenly made him realize the whole thing. There were cameras all over the prison. The experiment's initiators had already seen it. The initiators of the experiment had seen it all, but they didn't stop them by flashing the red light. On the contrary, they constantly encouraged the guards to act in bad faith and to increase their power. All this made Henry angry and disappointed. He realized that the prison system had lost all sense of justice and humanity. On the sixth day, Henry had a violent confrontation with the yellow-haired guard. In the end, Henry overpowered him and gave the prisoners the key. The inmates took the key and quickly opened the cell door. All the prisoners were released. Jack was already dead. The prisoners were furious and saddened. Henry took the weapon and headed for the guard room. He smashed into the door. The guards' eyes were red, but none of them dared to stop him. The warden grabbed a knife and tried to fight back, but his men stopped him. He was reminded that this was just an experiment and that it was time to wake up. The door was about to open. The guards ran for the exit. They want to put an end to this crazy experiment. 06:3506:40. The door is finally opened. The prisoners are swarming in, but no matter how hard the guards try, they can't get the exit open. The warden is in a state of anxiety. Just then the prisoners came after him. There's no need for any more fighting. But as Henry rushed towards the warden, the prison's red light suddenly came on, interrupting him. At the same time, the prison gates opened automatically. The sunlight flooding in is blinding. The inmates come out and look at the world. They begin to wake up. They realize they're just characters trapped in a prison. The film The Death Experiment, based on the Stanford Prison Experiment, it provokes thoughts about the nature of human nature. In the film, each participant receives a bonus after the experiment ends prematurely, but after they put on the clothes of civilization, they don't know how to face the ugliness inside. This reflects the complexity of human nature and its deep moral challenges. There are those who believe in the inherent goodness of human nature. They believe that people are born with good instincts. They believe in the influence of the environment and society in making people bad. Others believe that human beings are inherently evil. They believe that human beings are inherently selfish, greedy and evil. They need to be disciplined and guided by social norms and moral education. The truth is that human nature is very complex. It contains both goodness and empathy as well as selfishness and malice. Human behavior is influenced by many factors. It is not possible to simply categorize human nature as an absolute good or bad thing.
Evolution